What's going on, everybody? In today's beginner video, we're going to talk about the basics of auto layout constraints. And we're going to do a little bit programmatically, but mostly it's going to be on the storyboard. Now, as you can see on the screen here, we're going to build this nice little login screen as the example today. And again, I want to reiterate, this is going to be a beginner video. Auto layout constraints can get pretty complex, but again, we're just starting with the basics today. All right, so let's dive into what we're actually going to build today. As you can see here on the left, I have this Wave Finder app, little app I made up with a logo, background. We got some, email, password, text fields, and a login button. Just the basic login screen to get us started. This video is sponsored by Dev Mountain, a 12-week in-person bootcamp where you can learn web development, iOS development, and UI UX design. Now, if you know my story, I myself am a bootcamp grad, and it was part of my process to become a full-time iOS developer, which I have been here in Silicon Valley for the past 3 years. Now, I even had a member of my community go through the Dev Mountain program, and now he is a full-time iOS developer. I even did an interview with him about it on my channel here. You can check that out. And, disclaimer, I did that interview before Dev Mountain reached out to sponsor the channel, so there's no bias there. And, he did it. Like I said, myself am a bootcamp grad, so if you feel a bootcamp is for you, I think it works and I recommend it. Now, if you are interested in learning more about Dev Mountain, there will be a link in the description, so check that out. Let's dive into the starter project just to give you some context of what we're working with. I just did file new project. As you see, nothing's been done on the view controller. I did bring in some custom views. So, and that is, so if I pull back up the, this button, I don't want to spend time stylizing this button or stylizing these text fields. So I have these custom views, SA button and SA text field. Those are in the sample project linked in the description. So if you want to follow along from the start, go ahead and download that project and pull these files into your project from that sample project. But we'll run through it real quick. So all SA button is doing is it's a custom button class. And you can see I'm just setting the background color to this tropic blue, changing the font of the title, rounding off the corners here with the corner radius, and then setting the title color to white. So again, just basic stylizing, and then more of the same in the SA text field. I won't go through all these lines of code, but just so you know, this is the code that makes the text fields look the way they look on screen. But I want to point that out because when we build them on Storyboard, they're going to look like just plain old text fields and plain old buttons. It won't be until we run the app, they're going to look stylized and nice. So just wanted to avoid any confusion there. So, all right, let's go back to the main storyboard and get started building this login screen. So back again to the login screen, you can see the first thing I want to address is this background, this nice, beautiful background of a wave. Now you could do, Command-Shift-L to open up your object library, type in image view, drag that on. Now, we're not going to do this, but I want to show you why. So like you could, whatever, I'm not going to do it perfect and do the constraints. You could just do this and make your background like that, and I think that's how a lot of people would build it. But the reason I recommend not doing that is if we open up our object library again, now let's say we want to add a button. Now you're like dragging the button on top of the image view, and you're building everything like on top of this image view. And what will happen a lot is as you're clicking around your storyboard, you may accidentally grab the background image view and drag it off to the side or something. And it's just a headache and annoyance. So for that reason, and I recommend doing this on your view controllers that have a background image, we're going to do the background image programmatically. That way, when we're working in our view controller and I'm dragging the button on and everything like that, there's no giant UI image view in the background. So that's what we're going to start off with. If you are a super beginner, I don't want to scare you. We're not going to do too much programmatically. Again, it's just the background image programmatic, and then the rest of it is going to be on Storyboard. So let's go into our viewcontroller.swift file, and we'll make this code bigger here. So as you can see, I already done a little bit of work. I've let background image view. I've already initialized the image view, and I've created the stub of the function set background, and then called that function in view did load. So when the view loads, we're going to call set background. So now let's go ahead and constrain this background image view to the edges of our screen here. So when you're working with constraints programmatically, the first thing you need to do is add that specific view to the parent view. So we'll just do view.add subview, and the subview we want to add is the background image view. So now our view has that image view, and now we just need to constrain it to the edges. Now, when doing constraints programmatically, you need to let Xcode know that you want to use auto layout. And the way you do that on the view is, so type background image view dot, and I just start typing auto resizing, and then you see this translates auto resize mask into constraints. You want to set that equal to false. I can't type, false. And again, that lets Xcode know you're going to use auto layout. So now we can set our constraints programmatically, and we want to use what's called anchors. Now, anchors were introduced in iOS 9. They essentially made the syntax around setting constraints programmatically much cleaner, much nicer, much more easy to reason about. It used to be these really, really long methods. So we're going to be using anchors. So background image view dot, we'll say top anchor, and that is dot constraint. So we're creating a constraint, and then we want it to be, you'll see equal to, with a constant here. So we want it to be equal to the view. We're going to, because it's the background view, right? So we're going to pin it to the edges of the view. So we want it to be the view dot top anchor. And then the constant is going to be 0. So actually, because the constants are going to be 0, we don't even need the constant variable. We'll get to that in a little bit. And then we want to set is active equal to true. So what we just did is we pinned the top of our UI image view to the top of the view, the entire top of the screen. Now in this case, because we want our background to fill the entire screen, we're not going to mess with the safe area inset. The safe area inset is new with the iPhone 10 family with the notches and the no home button. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but if you were to pin it to the safe area, it wouldn't go into the notch area, and then the home indicator that you swipe up at the bottom, it wouldn't cover that up. But because this is our background, we don't want a space at the bottom and a space at the top. That would look weird. So we're going to pin it to the whole view so it fills up the entire phone. So what we just did here on line 24 with the top anchor is pin it to the view top. So as you can imagine, we're essentially going to do the same thing to all 4 edges. So background image view dot bottom anchor dot constraint, and then we want to go ahead and make it equal to NSLayout anchor, and then view dot bottom anchor, and then again we need to set it to be active is active equals true, and then again just all around the sides. So I'm going to fast forward some typing and we'll talk about it. Okay, so I just wrote out these 2 lines here, and again, just like I was doing, so now we want to do the leading anchor. So the leading is going to be the left side, trailing is going to be the right side in left to right reading languages. So if you are in a right to left reading language, the leading will actually be on the right, the trailing will be on the left, but most languages are left to right, so safe to assume leading will be the left anchor. So I want to pin the leading anchor of my background image view to the leading anchor of the view. That's just another way of saying pin the left side, pin it to the left side. And then the same here with the trailing anchor, pin it to the right side is active equals true. So I am calling set background in view did load. So let's go ahead and run this, and we should see our beautiful wave background pinned to the edges of the view in our simulator. And actually, I forgot one very important part. We need to tell what image is in the background. So let's go ahead and do background image view dot image equals UI image, and then that is going to be based on just the name, the string, and that is going to be background dash wave. And now if I go ahead and run it, we should see the wave. And there we are. As you can see, our background view fills the entire screen. And like I said, back to that safe area thing, because this is important when dealing with UI on the new iPhone 10 family of phones. Up here in the notch, see it fills in the background of the notch, and then even below the home indicator, it fills that in. So now there are certain circumstances where you will want it to stop before the home indicator. For example, when we put our button on this screen, we don't want the button to cover the home indicator. So that's like a little brief intro into safe area insets. Again, this whole constraints thing is a very, very broad and complex topic. This is just the beginning and the basics. All right, so let's start adding the other elements onto the screen here. So let's stop this. Now we're going into our main.storyboard, and the rest of it is going to be mostly storyboard stuff. So if I pull back up the design here, this is just how I think of it. I look at when I'm laying out my screen, like kind of grouping things together. Now we could get into like stack views and stuff, but again, I'm keeping this beginner, basic, simple. So the way I would group this screen that we're looking at is I would group the text fields and the login button as one group, and then the logo and the wayfinder title as another group. Now, the reason I'm talking about groups is because I'm going to be pinning them to each other. For example, the way I would build this screen is I would start at the bottom with this login button. I would pin that, to the bottom, get that right. And then building on top of that login button, I would build these 2 text fields on top of that and pin those to each other. However, this group here of the logo and the wayfinder title aren't going to be pinned to these text fields and titles at all. And the reason I want to do that is because, as you know, and you can kind of tell by this picture here, the X family of phones has a new aspect ratio. It's real tall, long, and skinny, whereas the older phones are 16:9 aspect ratio, and the iPhone 10 family is like more of a 2:1 aspect ratio. So they're not as long and skinny. So basically the way I'm envisioning this is as the phones get shorter, all that's going to happen is my group of text fields and button is just going to slide up, as the phone gets skinnier, and then we'll just basically lose a little bit of this space if we lose any height on the screen from going to like an iPhone 5, for example. So that's kind of the strategy and why I'm grouping them separately. That way I can move those two groups accordingly based on, the screen size. So that being said, hope that made sense. I'm going to go ahead and start building my bottom section, my login button, and my text fields. So back into Xcode, again, Command-Shift-L to pull up the library. We got our button here. Drag the button on. And the first thing I want to do before I forget is, like I said, we want to make this an SA button. Over here on the left, you see this is the custom button. So back to the storyboard. This is going to do all the styling for us, so I don't have to waste your time styling it. So pull it out here, make sure I have my button selected, class, and where it says UI button, I just need to make it an SA button, and that's going to give me all that style, because we want to focus on the constraints here. So let's zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. Get rid of this. Clicking on the button here. Now I want to pin the button to the edges, similar to what we did with the background, except now I want some padding in there. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go in the lower right to this little, if you're a Star Wars fan, I always call it a TIE fighter. Click on that, and then you get these 4 boxes on the right. So this is going to be the top, leading, bottom, trailing, and then I always don't constrain the margins because that'll give you a built-in margin if you want to do that. I like having full control, so I always unclick constrain to margins. You don't have to, that's a personal preference thing. But so anyway, so now on our button, again, the first thing we're going to do is pin it to the left and right edge. So I want a padding of, let's say 30 on each side. So change those to 30, and then you see these red lines went solid. And you can hit down here, and you can see, remember I talked about the safe area? So right now it's pinned to the safe area or the view. I'm gonna go ahead and do the view. The reason you might wanna do a safe area when you're pinning to the left and right edge is because if you are building an app that rotates and you wanna go into landscape mode, now the notch is on the left or right edge, so you have to kind of account for that. But that's not an issue with our app, so we're just gonna go ahead and pin it to the view. Again, put it back to 30. I'm gonna probably have to do that again. View, back to 30, cool. And now I wanna pin this to the bottom, but remember I don't wanna pin it to, so it covers up the home button. So this time I do wanna pin it to the safe area. When you pin it to the safe area, it's gonna automatically adjust for you for when there is a home button and when there's not a home button. So long story short, I want this to be to the safe area, and then let's just call it 20 from the safe area. So now I have my left, right, bottom. It needs to know where it is vertically, and that's a good segue. A good rule of thumb, your object should only have 4 constraints on them. Now, again, that's a rule of thumb because a more complex UI, you can conditionally set some constraints, but that's a whole nother issue. 98% of the time, you're gonna have 4 constraints on your object. If you find yourself with 6 or 7 constraints, you're probably doing it wrong and you're gonna cause yourself some headaches. So here I am with 3 out of my 4 constraints. And basically, Xcode needs to know a height, a width, and an X and a Y coordinate on the screen. And there's various ways to get to those numbers. So right now, it knows the X and the Y because it knows it needs to be pinned to the edges, and then it knows it's 20 from the bottom. But now I need to give it a height. And that also pinning it to the edge gives it the width. So the only thing missing is a height. So let's go ahead and do that. We're gonna make the height 50. Tap add 4 constraints, and there's my button. Now let's pull this back up, give it the title of login, hit enter, and then zoom out. So our button should be good to go. So let's go ahead and run this and check it out. And then one thing I forgot to do, because I did just run it and my background was on top of my button. So just to be safe, in the view controller here, in where we did the background image view, you can do view.send subview to back. So basically send it all the way to the back of the view hierarchy. So it's going to be on the bottom, and it's our background. So that's what we want. And then we want background image view to do that. So now when we run it, let's go back to our storyboard. Our login button will be on top of our image view. And as you can see, there's our login button, nice and stylized. And this is kind of what I call the skeletal storyboard approach, where I do this stuff on Storyboard just to get the structure of the screen, but all the styling happens in code in these custom classes. So you're kind of getting a peek at that. I did a whole video on that. I'll link to the description. But I wanted to do that here so we could focus on just the constraints. So as you can see, I pinned it 20 from the safe area of the home button indicator, and then we're pinning 30 points to the left or the right, and then it's of a height of 50. So now we're going to put our text fields on top of this button. So let's go ahead and do that. Command-Shift-L to pull up our text field, drag that onto here. So the first things first is let's make this text field an SA text field, which is just short for Sean Allen text field. SA text field, that's going to give us all the styling we want. And now that we have that set, little trick, if you hold Option and then drag up, and then make sure you let go of the mouse button first before you let go of option. That'll create a copy. So now I have my two SA text fields. And then the same thing, I want this to be of similar size to the login button to have that uniform look. So we're gonna do what we did with the login button, and that is 30 on the left and the right. And again, we're gonna pin that to the view. I'm gonna have to do that again. So pin it to the view, 30. And then I want it to be 40 sounds about right. So you can tell what it's going to be pinned to by this drop-down box. So I click the drop-down box and I want it to be pinned to the login button. So that I want it to be 40 points up from the login button. So that works. So again, now the only thing I am missing is a height on the text field. So the text field and these button layout are basically the same thing. So I'll fast forward through the next text field because it's going to be the same exact thing, but a height of 50, good to go. And there we go. You can see one of the text field has been constrained with the constraints and the other one hasn't. And you can see, what a debacle the other one is. So that's what it looks like without constraints. With constraints, looks beautiful. And it's going to be nice on, all screen sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and set the constraints on the other one now. So again, same thing. We want from the view 30, view 30. I want to pin it to the other text field. So to the text field, and we only want a 10-point difference there. And again, height is going to be 50 because that is the style we're going for. So there we go. Now we should have our bottom section completely done now when I run this. And then all that's left is the logo and the title. Yep, so there you go. Our login fields look nice. Now, one thing when you build login screens, this is kind of an aside, you're going to have to deal with what all iOS developers hate dealing with, and that is moving the keyboard up and making that behave properly. Because as you know, when you click on this keyboard, let me Command K to show the hardware keyboard. The keyboard is going to cover up your login screen, your login text fields, and then you got to move those up. I kind of did this on purpose just to show you the painfulness sometimes of building these login screens. Anytime you have to deal with the keyboard, it's a pain, and there's like 10 different ways to do it. Yeah, it's rough, but just wanted to give you a little sneak peek into what it's really like. All right, so I have my bottom section. Remember, I considered this the bottom group. And then let's just, for good measure, just to show you, let's go ahead and run it on an iPhone 5S. And then here, as you can see, because I pinned it to the bottom, it still looks good on the iPhone 5S, even though it's way shorter than the iPhone X. And then you can imagine where the logo will be. So that is what auto layout does. That's the whole main point, right? It makes it so if you do it correctly, no matter what screen size you're on, it should look good. All right, so let's go ahead and add the top portion. Now, if we go back to the design, the way I would do this is I would start with the logo and then attach the wayfinder to the bottom of the logo. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to basically give the logo a height and width. It looks like a square, so whatever the dimensions are of a square. And then I'm going to center it horizontally. I'll show you how to do that. And then I'm going to actually center it vertically and then offset it by, I don't know the number yet, but a few points to make it look good. That way, no matter what the screen size is, it'll start at the center and then get adjusted up by X amount of points, which I'm going to figure out. That will always make sure it looks good on most screen sizes. Because if you pin it from the top, say like right here, I pin it from the top and then make this pin from the top like 200 points. When you're on the iPhone 5, that's going to be way low. It's going to overlap your your text field. So you got to keep in mind when you're building these, what it's going to look like on all screens. So that is the strategy. Let's do it. All right, so back in our project, we're going to drag our logo onto here. I can make this smaller now so you can see the whole thing. So Command-Shift-L to pull up the image view, drag that on. And again, like I said, I wanted this to be a square. So let's go down to our little TIE fighter looking guy here. So the first thing I'm going to do, just for my own sanity, is the height and width. Or width and height. So let's do 250. Try that. That should be good. Now you see these red lines I get. When you see these red lines, this means that like, hey, there's missing constraints because I've only done 2. Remember I said Xcode needs to know height, width, X and Y. Right now I just told it height and width. So it's like, hey, I don't know X and Y. I don't know where to put this is basically what these red lines are telling you. Let's give it that X and Y. So next to the left of the TIE fighter is the alignment. You see it says align if I just hovered over it. So you click on that, and then now you can see the rest of these are grayed out. And that's because I'm not like aligning it to another view. So you can see there's leading edges, trailing edges, top edges, bottom edges. If I had 2 image views and I wanted to make sure their tops were aligned, I would do align top edges, or same thing with leading edge or trailing edge. So you can line up views that way. And while we're on the subject, down here with these text fields, I could have, instead of making them both pin to the edges, like you know how I pinned the bottom one to the edges? Well, what I could have done is if you control drag from this one to this one, that means you're going to pin it to each other. And then I could have done, you see here, was equal widths. So the reason I want to point this out is there are multiple ways to do these. And again, like I said, this is why this is a very complex topic as you get into it. But you see equal widths, equal heights, you can aspect ratio, you can align the tops like we just talked about. So I did just want to point that out because, I'll probably get in the comments, well, why didn't you do it this way? And there's so many different ways to do this. And again, I'm trying to keep this as straightforward as possible because this is just a beginner video. Maybe I'll do like a more advanced video where I build a really complex UI. But again, this is in my beginner series, so we're keeping it simple. All right, back to the UI image view. Remember, I have my height and width. So back to the align, because I don't have another view selected, it's automatically going to default to like the overall view. And that's what I want to center it in. So go to align. You see at the bottom, horizontally centering container and vertically centering container. So I want to do both of those because for now, I'm not going to adjust the vertical constant. We're going to come back to that. So add two constraints. There we go. 240 by 240, dead in the middle of the view. Now, as you can see, that's not going to work well. That's really close to my text fields. Just for the image, let's go ahead and drop in the actual image. That was a wave logo. Cool, there it is. So this is what I meant by I'm going to adjust the size. And actually, I think 250 by 250 is big. So here's a good thing in the way I edit constraints. So I already have the constraints on this logo done. But if you click this little ruler button in the inspector, you can actually edit your constraints here. So as you can see, I have 4 constraints on this. Remember, we talked about the X, Y, the height, and the width. I think 250 by 250 is going to be too big. So let's go ahead and edit that to like 210. Whoops. And then edit 210. So there you go. So now I'm editing my constraints in real time. And when I talked about adjusting the constant on the Y, so it's aligned center to Y, I want to bump it up from the center. So basically what I'm telling it is like, find the center, now subtract this much from it. So edit, and then, I don't know, let's try, there's some trial and error involved with this as well. Let's do negative 50. That's not going to be enough. Negative 100, not going to be enough. Negative 150, maybe too much. Negative 125, right there. So now let's run it and see what that looks like. And we're on the iPhone 5 still. I just did that by accident, but that's good because you can kind of see what it's going to look like on the iPhone 5. There you go. Look good on the iPhone 5. Maybe the logo's a little too big on the iPhone 5. And you can sometimes, if you really want to dial in your UI, conditionally set the sizes of things, based on the screen size. But let's actually just make it smaller. Let's go to 190 by 190. Adjust that a bit. And then now let's go ahead and run it on the iPhone XS to make sure it's still looking good there. And I always use the iPhone 5 because that is the most drastic change because that is the super small phone nowadays. So here we are on the iPhone XS. Looks good. I think it could be bumped up a little bit more. Again, there's a lot of trial and error. We won't worry about it too much. Don't want to waste your time tweaking things. So now the only thing we're missing is the title label. So let's go ahead and do Command-Shift-L. Label, drag that onto here, and I know these, so it is Wave Finder, and my font is the font I'm using for this project is Avenir Next Condensed. So let's find the Avenir Next Condensed, and then it is of the demi bold variety, and I don't know, let's make this 30 font. Sounds about right. So there's my label. Now, what I want it to do is I'm going to center it to the image just because, like I said, there's multiple ways to do it. I could just center it in the view because the image is centered in the view, like everything's centered in the view. But just for variety, I want to pin it to just to this logo. Now, one mistake I made early in my career is I would only make this as long as I needed for Wave Finder in English. One thing you have to keep in mind, if your app is ever localized, different languages have different lengths of words. For example, German words tend to be typically super long. So just to be safe, whenever I have the space to do it, I always basically pin it to the edges, even if I don't have to. So again, let's go ahead and change this to view. Make it 20, give it a little margin, view 20, add 2 constraints. So, and then I will go ahead and over here on the right, make sure it's centered. So if I click on my constraints, you see I have leading and trailing over here on the right. It needs to know its Y position, basically how far from the logo, and then it needs to know its height. So let's go ahead and add those constraints. I'm going to do it a different way. Remember, I've been clicking this TIE Fighter the whole time. Again, just to show you some of the different ways, I can click and drag to here. And then if I do vertical spacing, that's going to give it the vertical spacing. Now it's missing a height. So now we go down to our TIE Fighter, give it a height of 41's fine. that'll fit. Oh, and then I wanted to make this white, actually, the color. So back to the inspector. The color of the text is going to be white. So you're not going to see it on the storyboard, but you'll see it in the app. So that is the basic layout. Now, one thing, back to what I said about when you're dealing with labels and auto layout, people use different dynamic text sizes. If you're localizing your app, different languages or different lengths. So you always want to, in your labels, I shouldn't say always, right? Nothing is absolute, but most of the time, you want to, if you see down here this auto shrink where my mouse is, fixed font size, you don't want that. That means it'll never shrink. So what I do is I do minimum font size. So you know this font size is 30, but I want to do minimum font size of like 20. What that's going to do, if for some reason where this wayfinder word got too long, you know, say it's in German, or I don't know, maybe the label's dynamic. Maybe it's not always going to be Wayfinder. Maybe it's somebody's name that you're downloading from a server, so you have no idea how long it's going to be. What auto shrink does is basically will shrink the text based on how long it is to make sure it fits within that label. So again, I'll bring that back to constraints. That's the reason I always pin it to the edges to give myself as much space as possible. Because if I gave this a fixed width of like 200, now, you know, I'm only gonna have a little bit of room to work with. So again, this can get really complex. So let's go ahead and run this. And there you go, that's the basics of it. Let's pull up the design right next to it so we can see it. I always like to do this when I'm building my designs. So you can see it's not 100% exact because, you know, the wayfinder should be bigger, maybe the logo should be taller. It actually looks like the logo should be smaller too. Now, keep in mind, I did this just, you know, eyeballing it. When you're actually getting a design from a designer, if you're working with somebody, you're going to have all the dimensions of what it should be exactly. So keep that in mind as well. But another little tip when I'm building my UI, I like to pull up the design in side by side, and, you know, I need to maybe resize this to make sure it's the same exact size, but and just compare it literally side by side to make sure I've gotten as close as possible. So there you go. There's beginner constraints. Again, we did a little bit programmatically. We did most of it on Storyboard. This was a very, very basic layout, but because this is, again, a beginner video, wanted to keep it simple. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment. I'm very responsive in my comment section. So hopefully this was helpful. If you like what I'm doing here, consider subscribing. I put out Swift news every Monday and then a tutorial or two throughout the week. See you in the next one.